Viessa is a complicated yet simple unit to understand. Weird phrase, but it will make sense when I get more into the video. And yes, this is my third video for her, and fixing a lot of the dumb things I've done in my previous videos. What's good, folks? It's Nightmare Frame here with a new first Descendant video with a perfected Viessa builds. This video will contain 3 Viessa setups as they will be using 3 skill modules for each one. I'll be using Absolute Zero, Hypothermia, and Cold-Bloodedness. The thing with Viessa that makes her complicated to some is that she is a chill unit that has 2 alignments, Fusion and Tech. But depending on what skill module you use, you will change parts to singular or the entire kit into singular and change how the passive works. And all her skills have very high motion values, so she deals so much damage already with very little investment. To understand how it all works, let's take a look at her passive, because that's something that does define the unit. So Viessa triggers a status effect called Ice Shackles on enemies when using any of her skills on them, and each skill has different levels of Ice Shackle stacks. And when triggering Ice Shackle, she spawns Ice Spheres. These are the floating orbs that damage nearby enemies by sending out ice projectiles. Her passive is chill and tech aligned originally and gets affected by skill modules. So let's go over her skill modules to explain how these mods will affect her kit and the builds. Starting off with Absolute Zero. This is an ultimate Viessa skill module. It changes her entire kit into singular. That is also including her passive. And instead of Ice Shackles, it inflicts Frost Bite, the regular chill status effect. So when you land a critical hit, you trigger Frost Bite. And when you trigger Frost Bite, you spawn Ice Spheres. On top of the change, it does increase her overall damage on her skills. So this skill module is an all-rounder mod that makes her entire kit very straightforward when it comes to modding, and you won't have to worry about balancing between fusion or tech reactors. And because this skill module allows you to trigger Frostbite, it is the only way you're able to utilize the Polar Knight set bonus without modding your weapons with the chill element or running a bonus chill substat. The second skill module is Hypothermia. This affects your entire kit as well, where it triggers a damage over time status effect alongside your skills. The first 3 skills are fusion normally, but the damage over time is singular aligned, and it scales with chill power, skill power modifiers, and even singular boosts. However, the 4th skill and passive are completely changed into singular, and this status effect is now called Ice Needle. When you trigger Ice Needles, you're then able to trigger Viessa's regular passive of Ice Spheres. And finally, the best skill modules for Viessa's 4th ability, Nuking. That's great for wave-based, ad clear, and even bossing. Cold-Bloodedness. This removes the way your second ability usually works and turns it into a buff, where it increases the duration of your abilities, skill power, and reduces the cooldown and MP cost. So as you can see, perfect for overall nuke spamming. I personally only use this for bossing, so I paired up with a Slayer set bonus that helps me nuke bosses with her 4th skill and then follow up with her other abilities. Alright, now that you know what I have in stored, let's take a look at how I've put all of these builds together, alongside some additional recommendations. Alright, here we are in the laboratory showcasing how these builds are put together. I'm going to start off with the Absolute Zero build. This is the one that converts all your abilities into singular and also gives them the Frostbite stats effect instead of the Shackle. As you may have noticed right now, all my skills are singular, including my passive. And the skills got a little boost to their damage. Now everything functions the same. Your second skill does leave an ice trail and deals damage. Your first is just a projectile nuke. Your third is this frost wave that you shove in front of enemies' faces, and boom, your blizzard is a blizzard. Everything is just the same. It's just that now you proc Frostbite and are more concerned about your crits. And with the Absolute Zero setup, you're able to take full advantage of the Polar Knight set. The Polar Knight set is this set right here, which you can get this from Dead Bride. It gives you a 6.2% chill power increase, and of course increases your critical damage on your weapons and abilities. So the auxiliary, you want that max HP, max MP is always a must on the sensor, and of course it comes with a max HP main stat, and an MP recovery instead of a shield recovery will be a lot better, but this is what I got, so I'm coping. And for the memory, you want defense as a substat and MP recovery modifier. And then finally, you want to have that max shield and shield recovery modifier on your last one. And this is the set you'll be using if you're running absolute zero. It is the perfect set for that skill module. And for your reactor, well, you want a chill reactor and a singular power reactor because all your skills are now singular. And for the substats, you can go with skill cost, skill cooldown like what I have, or you can increase your crits with a crit rate, crit damage. A duration boost is also not so bad because I won't be running any duration on the build. But for a more balanced setup, this is what I suggest: skill cost and skill. The mounting can be whatever you want. It just happens to drop on my enduring legacy, so that's what I'm going to be using. 11k HP, 11k defense, 1k shield, and nearly 300 MP. So let's take a look at the modules. Now, for those who don't understand how modules and sockets work, you equip an energy activator. It increases your module capacity, and equipping a sub-module slot will increase that capacity a little bit more. So right now I'll be running the long distance maneuvering. It goes from 70 to 85. Now I have 2 C's, 2 R's, 2 M's, and 3 A's. Now, if you want to shove in a bit more damage, you can drop the 1 R and turn it into an A for even more crits, because the A's are all going to be crits. Starting off with our first C mod, it's of course going to be HP. Survivability is very important. And then we also have another C slot, and that C slot is going to be our focus on chill. This gives me a skill power increase and reduces my cooldown by 6.1%. And with the 2 R slots, I'm going to be shoving in a bit more survivability with Spear and Shield. Spear and Shield gives me defense and skill power. This setup is all about skill power. Viessa's skills are very overtuned, and she has a lot of damage that she can dish out with these abilities. So we don't have to worry too much about a skill power modifier on this particular build. And now the other R slot is going to be skill expansion, because we want to increase the range of our skills. So our explosion radius and our massive AoE radius, our reach and radius is all increased thanks to skill expansion. The 3 A slots are all going to be crit related, but I want to focus more on increasing my critical hit rate because she needs the crit to actually trigger the skill modules that we're going to be using. So starting off with skill insight, this increases my critical hit rate by 115%. This is a multiplier to your base value. So you see you get a skill critical hit rate increase of 115. This is not your crit rate. This is the multiplier to your base value. Please understand that. And then we're going to add in emergency measures for some more critical hit rate and gives you a substat of crit damage. And then finally, front lines. This is a swapped version of emergency measures. So instead of crit rate, it's crit damage as the main stat and crit rate as the substat. So we're going to save that, and now you can see I have an increase of 207% to my critical hit rate and 92.3% to my crit damage. So now we're switching out to the M socket, and the M sockets are all going to be cooldown related. Starting off with MP conversion. This does decrease my maximum MP, but it gives me that juicy minus 36.5% skill cooldown. And then topping it up with nimble fingers for that additional minus 25.6% skill cooldown decrease. The final slot here is an X slot, and this is a somewhat of an ability spam, and I'm going to be using this a lot for pretty much everything from mobbing, whatever. I decided to go with MP Collector. When defeating an enemy, instantly recovers 12.2% of your mana at a 17% chance. This is easily triggered by every sort of kill that comes from you. So your guns, your abilities, it doesn't matter. It will give you mana if it triggers. And of course, the skill module for this build is going to be absolute zero. Take a look at our skills. It's fusion, 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 tech, and the passive is chill tech with that ice shackle. And when I save, everything does change. So instead of ice shackles, now I deal frostbite, and all of my skills are now singular, and that is why I'm running that singular reactor. And now moving on to the hypothermia build. You can see my skills are also different on this particular loadout. But have a look at this. When I activate my skills, I now deal damage over time, and it spawns these ice needles. That is that status effect right there. All of this damage over time is affected by skill power modifier, anything that increases your motion values. And you can see the enemies are taking that circular damage type that is singular. Even though I deal initial fusion damage, but everyone else is taking singular damage over time. And my fourth skill is also changed into a singular ability. So let's take a look at the components and the reactor. So with the components, I'm running a two-piece. So that's two-piece Polar Knight set, the same ones I used on my previous loadout with Absolute Zero, and a two-piece Annihilation set. And this gives me some duration. The memory increases my HP and gives me defense with that juicy MP recovery modifier. And of course, some max HP over here. If you want, you can swap the pieces around so you can have a bit more shields and everything. But I highly recommend for you to have the same setup with max HP, max shield, and a shield recovery modifier. That's always good to have. And you can get a toxin resistance with shield recovery modifier. That's also really good. Now, you may have noticed in this setup, I did lose a bit of my HP and a bit of my mana, because this is all focused on maintaining your abilities a bit longer and having your damage over time be the main source of damage. Looking at my reactor, it's also a singular reactor, but this time I went with a thunder cage mounting because I want to be moving a bit faster. If you didn't know, your type of weapon will affect how fast you move. So the lighter the weapon, the faster you move. In this case, since this is an ad clear build, it's great for rushing through infiltrations, dungeons. I decided to go with an amazing ad clear weapon, and that is the thunder cage. And for the substats on this reactor, I did go with skill cost. That's always nice to have, and a singular skill power boost ratio. This does affect your damage over time as well, so that's a big bonus. So let's take a look at the subtle changes I've done to the Hypothermia build compared to the Absolute Zero, because there's just a few mods that did change. As you can see, these are the same mods from the previous build, and I just changed these 4 mods. Of course, for the skill module, I'll be running Hypothermia. Take a look at my skills. These are the base skills again. When I save it, it turns into this passive. Now you have Ice Needles, and your passive is now singular aligned. Along with your 4th skill, it's now singular instead of tech. Your 3 skills are still fusion aligned, but they do trigger the singular damage over time with Ice Needle. Now, instead of running the regular HP mod, I will be running Battle of Stamina. This does lower the amount of HP that I get, but it gives me that 8.8% skill duration. Now, for the X slot, instead of running MP Collector, I will be running Skill Simplification. This increases my skill power modifier. This affects the motion values of all of my abilities. So you'll be doing even more upfront damage and increasing your damage over time. And for the R slot, instead of running Spear and Shield, I'll be running Iron Defense. They're pretty much the same, but this one gives me an increase to my skill power modifier. These two skill power modifiers are additive to each other. So yeah, this is the Hypothermia build. So you have all this damage over time. It's some nice passive damage for those who are not worried about big numbers. But as you can see, it's consistent and reliable. And it's also one of my favorite setups in the game. And yes, I'm testing it against enemies who are weak to chill. And now I'm on my boss setup. This is the Cold-Bloodedness Set-Up. As you can see, my second skill is different from how it usually looks like. Right there, Cold-Bloodedness. I no longer leave an ice trail behind, but now I get an increase to my duration on all my skills. I get a skill power increase. It reduces how much mana I use, and it reduces the cooldown of my abilities. So take a look at the 4th skill. This is originally 19 seconds. When I activate my second ability to activate Cold-Bloodedness, that cooldown goes all the way down to 7.1 seconds. That's pretty good. And having duration on this setup is also really nice because it affects how long your blizzard remains on the field. So you can see that's a lot of damage right now. Boom. So it has an initial damage, it has continuous damage, and then a final burst of damage. So this is really good against bossing. Now, there are some weapon synergies you can do with this particular build. Number 1, I would highly recommend if you can get either a Secret Garden or a Nazestra's Devotion. And finally, the Clairvoyance. Those are the top 3 guns I recommend for a Cold-Bloodedness build, especially if you're going up against bosses. Now, let me go over why those 3 weapons. So as I said, Secret Garden. Secret Garden does increase your skill power when you use a tech skill. This is a 50% chance to actually trigger it, so you'd have to spam your 4th skill a bit before you engage the boss. Now with Cold-Bloodedness, your cooldown reduction is then reduced. So again, you have to be lucky, trigger this, get the buff, and then go to the boss. This will allow you to deal even more damage. And this skill power increase affects all of your abilities, not just your 4th. Your 4th is just there to trigger it because it is a tech ability. So this is one of the weapons, but my favorite weapons I would highly recommend over the Secret Garden is reducing the boss's defenses. This also plays into gunplay, and that is thanks to Nazestra's Devotion. So this weapon has this amazing passive called Devotion's Mark. When you hit an enemy's weak point, you reduce their defenses by 30%. So this is a nice damage increase. So if you had a Nazastra's Devotion mount, if you had a Nazastra's mounting, that's a really nice tie-in to your damage output. And then finally, the Clairvoyance. This is a weapon I'm still trying to max out, so give me some time. So this has a nice passive that plays into gunplay along with your 4th skill. Because when you keep shooting this weapon, you can apply a debuff that has enemies take more damage to chill, as it reduces their chill resistance. So this is also really good against enemies who have a higher chill resistance. And the cool part is that this triggers the frostbite status effect. So if you want, you could also use the Polar Knight set with cold-bloodedness. That's if you want. However, for this cold-bloodedness setup, I am running the Slayer set. The Slayer set is all about increasing your skill power. It's not about the general rounds increase or whatever. It's just about that 26.1% skill power increase. Yes, it does have your abilities cost more, but with cold-bloodedness, it does reduce that skill cost, so you don't have to worry about it that much. Again, you want max HP on the auxiliary, max MP, MP recovery. This would definitely be better if I had that MP recovery modifier. And lastly, max HP, a max shield, or if you want, you can go with that toxin resistance if you're going up against enemies who deal toxin damage, like that piece right there. For your reactor, you want a chill tech reactor with either of the 3 weapon mountings that I mentioned. Unfortunately, it dropped for the Peacemaker, so I'm coping with it. So it does have additional damage when attacking Colossi, especially when you're dealing with bosses. So that is a big boon to your damage, and a tech skill power boost ratio. This is additional damage that affects your 4th skill. However, if you can get a crit damage increase, that's also really good, because that multiplies the damage when you crit. Keep farming, and if you have those rolls, you lucked out, my man. So let's take a look at how I've changed up this build. So instead of Iron Defense, I'll be running Spear and Shield, just like the Absolute Zero build. The Cold-Bloodedness module, that does change our 2nd skill to be a buff skill. And then finally, for the X slot, I'll be running Dangerous Ambush. So when landing a skill attack while enemy is not targeting you, you get a skill power increase. And on skill attack against immobilized enemies, your skill power further increases to 49.8%. So this is really nice for bossing, especially when they're staggered and knocked down. You deal even more damage with your 4th skill. And of course, you're going to be following up with your 3rd and 1st skill. They'll have a massive cooldown reduction and allow you to spam a bit more. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, these are the updated Viessa builds, the ones that I highly recommend for you to use. She does have other skill modules. This is her worst one. Don't ever use this. It's stupid. Cold Snap is really nice if you're in a farming situation and you want to use your 3rd skill. So the main way you would bot for this one is that you have a lot of range, duration, and skill cooldown reduction. So it requires a completely different setup to what you already have. Cold Cohesion is just having even more ice spheres. So you can run it the same way as you did Absolute Zero. All you have to do is change to Cold Cohesion. That's it. It's pretty much the same. And you'll either be running a fusion reactor or a tech reactor. But it's not really the best one out there. I did have a little bit of fun with this. I just ended up enjoying Absolute Zero a lot more. So we'll see how powerful these builds are in Season 1. So yeah, folks, that has been it for me. I do hope you enjoyed this video and learned something from it. And if you did, please feel free to leave a like, share, and subscribe for more First Descendant content, streams, and so much more. Do refer to the description. Thanks for watching, and as always, a peace. Bye-bye now.